Hi, I'm Alex, a 2000 rated OTB player. I'll be breaking down my thought process as we climb to 2000 in Rapid Chess to help you improve your own game. And here we have a Caro Kann, which is very good because I love the Caro Kann. Okay, knight to f3 is definitely a move. Of course, we will play d5, and white takes. Okay, so we'll have an exchange Caro Kann, and I actually had this exact position in a blitz game that I was playing about 20 minutes ago against like a 2200 rated player. And it's a line. It's a line. We'll play knight c6, and it's probably a good line for black because committing the knight to f3 so early isn't necessarily the best in the exchange variation. At least it's not the most testing line to face. Okay, bishop to e2. The reason I'm playing knight c6 rather than bishop g4 immediately, because we clearly want to play bishop g4, is, one, it's just a good developing move, and two, I want to see where white puts the bishop. So if white were to put the bishop on d3, then I'd go bishop g4. If white puts the bishop on e2, then I'm more inclined to go to f5. And, I mean, obviously keeps more pieces on the board, potentially, just because there's less tension between the bishops, which will most likely lead to a trade of bishops. But also, this is normally the most active diagonal for the light-squared bishop for white, particularly with this pawn structure. The bishop on d3 is very nice. So, if white's not going to take control of the diagonal, then I might as well. And obviously, I'm kind of doing the mirror thing with my bishop on d6. This is clearly the most active diagonal. If I were to do what white did and put the bishop on e7, it just feels kind of passive, right? And one of the very common ideas that I like to play in this structure, which is known as the Carlsbad structure, if you are not aware, it's very, very common in lots of different openings, namely the Caro Kann Exchange Variation, and I think in some Queen's Gambit as well, although I might be wrong on that. I think it's Queen's Gambit, but in reverse you get this, as in white would have this side of it, and black would have that side of it. Anyway, we probably want to play Queen c7. And the reason is because in this structure, you can see that with a rook on e1 and a knight on f3 and a pawn on d4, the main focus for white a lot of the time is to control the e5 square. And if white can successfully put a knight there and we can't get rid of it, it could be quite annoying. So, by going bishop d6, we're exerting control over e5. Queen c7 will exert further control over e5. We're also stopping bishop to f4, which would be useful for white. And in a lot of cases, we'll actually put our own bishop on f4 to facilitate some trades in the future. So let's go queen c7. This knight is often a weird piece to figure out where to develop, because we can put it on f6 and fight for the e4 square, but we can also consider putting it on e7, and maybe it comes to f5 in the future. Both of them are completely viable moves. We should probably make a decision now, though. Since the bishop isn't coming to g5, because the knight's in the way, I'm more inclined to play knight to f6. Just because, you know, it's a slightly more active square. Maybe we can come to f4 in the future. Okay, knight to h4 is not really concerning. I think I can just drop my bishop back. And taking would be a move that I would be pretty happy to see. Yeah, because I haven't committed to castling yet. I haven't castled. And you've just opened up the h-file against your own king. I think you can also see here why the knight is often a good piece on f5, because f5 would be a very nice square. But we can also hop the knight into, like, f4, which would be quite nice, going after the light squares, and potentially forcing a trade of the bishop for the knight. So this is an interesting position. I really don't want to castle, because I don't think there's a need to. We could play king f8, we could castle queenside, or for the moment we could just do nothing. With the king, I mean. So, okay. Knight e4 also looks good. Just whacking the knight right in the middle of the center, since this knight no longer sees it. If knight e4, bishop to d3, challenging my knight. If I'm going to leave the knight in the center, I'm going to have to play f5. Now, do I want to play that? I don't think so. It feels too weakening, particularly for g6 and e6, so I'm not really inclined to play that. We could play a6, which is always a useful move in these positions, but I feel like I want to do something with a bit more substance, right? Something a bit more meaningful. So, yeah, knight to h5 does look quite nice. I'm going to play it. I think putting the knight on f4 is a very good idea. g3 is obviously a very bad move. Your alarm bells should start ringing the moment g3 is played, because, I mean, we have so many pieces watching that square. We have an open h-file for the rook. The h3 pawn has now been weakened. My immediate instinct is just take, and my evaluation is that we have to be winning, right? I mean, we are. If you calculate it further, we just have probably a forced mate of some form. But you don't even need to calculate it. That's just clearly winning. So g3 can't be played to stop the knight coming to f4, basically. This knight also can't really come to e5 because, like I said, the bishop on d6 and a queen on c7 exert excellent control over the e5 square. So we just go up a pawn, which would be great. Here, white obviously has the bishop pair, which should be an advantage for white. But also the center is very locked. This bishop is not very impressive either, because he put it on e2 rather than d3, where it would be more active. Okay. Knight g5, that doesn't really do anything. I mean, I can't kick it away because I'll lose e6, but, I mean, I don't really care. I'll just whack the knight on f4. And the knight is very nice here, applying pressure to the bishop, here. If take, then take, and I'll kick the knight away, which I'll be happy to do. Also, we, of course, open up our rook now. We may not have some kind of, really cool attacking game here. It might be that the pieces just get traded, and, we have an open h-file, which could be useful, but more likely, we'll just start some kind of minority attack later on. But with the black pieces, you can't expect to have a completely winning position out of the opening. With either side, really. But particularly with black, if you just have an equal position, you should be pretty happy with that. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. And I do really appreciate the recent support on the channel. It has been really, really cool. Really cool. Also, actually, bishop f3 can't be played because of f6. And now we can play f6, because 1, e6 is defended, and 2, the knight can't retreat to f3. So the knight is just lost. Now, bishop f3, f6... Ooh, wait, there is bishop f4. And then knight to e6 can be played. So if we take the bishop, he takes on e6, that's no good. So... we'd have to take the knight, and that looks no good. That looks completely losing. So let's not get ahead of ourselves and do anything too drastic. We could prepare that kind of sacrifice. Well, it's not a sacrifice, sorry. We could prepare that kind of thing, but I don't think it necessarily works. We could preemptively defend the e6 pawn. Maybe. But, how are we going to do that? Okay, he takes. Awesome. And surely you just retreat the knight. And we have an interesting position where we have opposite-coloured bishops. There's still plenty of pieces on the board, so there's still lots of play. This isn't a drawn position because we have opposite-coloured bishops. If more pieces come off the board, then maybe. But that's not the case right now. And effectively, that means that the opposite-coloured bishop normally favours the side that is attacking, because... For example, here, we have a dark squared bishop, which means that white will struggle to defend the dark squares in his position, because he can't counter my bishop with his own bishop. So, I'm very tempted to play g5 and try and execute g4 to open up the h-file. If take, check, you can't take with the knight, of course, because queen takes would be making h1. I don't have any immediate checkmate, but I do have discovered checks, which could be useful. Difficult to evaluate. I could reroute my knight to the f5 square to help out with the attack, which is interesting. Although for the time being, my opponent could just hit me with bishop to b5 check. which would be very annoying. So I'm kind of tempted to play a6. Maybe c4 is on the cards to try and blast open the c file. However, I haven't committed my king yet, so I could just take, and then castle, and say, okay, d4 is very weak. Although maybe you can go d5, but rook d8 pins the pawn, queen b3, there's knight to a5, which is very nice. Interesting position. Interesting position. Okay, I think g5 is a little bit too much. Again, if g3, we will happily sack the bishop for the 2 pawns, and we should be completely winning there. Well, we just have forced mate, so, you know, that's very easy. But my opponent will not fall for that. At least I hope he wouldn't. So, something like g5, c4, rook d8. If take, that looks pretty good. Yeah, maybe c4 we just meet with rook d8. The question is, though, does g4 actually do anything? That's the issue. I can't really evaluate that move. Also, we can just move the knight so the bishop controls that square. So I'm going to say no. I don't think that's the way to go. So, okay, if we don't want to play g5, what do we want to play? Again, knight e7 comes to mind, but it's bishop to b5. So I think we just go a6, which is, like I said, always a useful move. Potentially, we are preparing b5, but we're just ensuring you can never, you know, give a check here. Now, if knight to e7, maybe queen to a4 is annoying, but I suppose, to be fair, we do have king f8, and we could just move the king. So maybe knight to e7 was fine, and if bishop to b5, we could just play king to f8 and say, haha, your bishop's out of the game, it should be back defending your king. That would have been completely valid. I don't know if I probably should have gone for that, because a6 is always a useful move. Anyway, in these positions, I mean, our position complements the bishop very well, as in, so many of our pawns are on light squares, which complement the dark squared bishop, because the bishop can, like, maneuver around the pawns very nicely. Okay, a4, let's go knight to e7. I think I want to reroute the knight. Is there an argument to be made for g5, knight g6? Does that do anything? I don't know. Maybe knight to f4. g5, g4. It's interesting. And if bishop to d3 challenging the knight, I can always just go g6. And if take, I mean, we're crushing there. Yeah, I think g5. I'm not really sure what my opponent's doing on the queen side, to be honest. I'm really not fussed. If you give this check, I will just move my king. And again, I will claim that your queen should be participating in the defense of the king, rather than doing whatever it's doing on the queen side. And at the end of the day, I can always just castle if I want to. There's nothing stopping me from castling if I change my mind. So that's also very nice. And again, let me repeat to the fact that g3 can't be played. You can't play g3, kick my bishop away and win my g5 pawn, which would be a decent idea, except for the fact that g3, I will just take it and I will checkmate you. After g3, take, king h1, rook h3, knight h2, and rook takes h2 is checkmate. So in these types of positions, you have to be very willing to sacrifice pieces, and that should always be the first thing that you consider to break open the king's defenses. Okay, how should we continue? Also worth noting, still knight to e5 can't be played. Yeah, my opponent does go for that, but I'm just going to play king f8, and then I'm going to say, well, what's your queen doing over here? There's nothing for it. You have no infiltration squares anywhere along this diagonal. I mean, you can try and play c4. I don't think it does anything particularly. I also control c1, so you can't even bring a rook to the c-file, which is pretty nice. And again, this bishop can't be kicked away with g3, because I'll just sacrifice the bishop. So even if we don't have a clear way through this position to, like, checkmate my opponent instantly, we are very dominant, I think. I think this is very dominant. And a big part of that is our bishop just monitoring these two diagonals, and even e5 is very important. g5 is very important. It's just a fantastic bishop. It really is just a fantastic bishop. And now I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with my knight. Ooh, okay. Knight to e1. That's a gross move. It's a gross looking move. Okay. Does drawing the king over here do anything? I don't think so. I don't think so. How should we continue? I think, well, firstly, knight to e1 means that bishop controls g4. So if I play g4, you'll just take with the bishop, right? Makes sense. I could try and play f5 to support the g4 push, so you would have to take with the pawn, which is interesting. It definitely is. The thing is, even if that happens and like checking h1, I don't have a useful discovery with the bishop. I don't see how I deliver checkmate there, because I need to get my bishop out the way. Although, I don't know, I suppose I can play a move like bishop to e3. Oh, bishop e3 would be disgusting. Oh, no, it wouldn't. My thought was if g3 I can take because the pawn is pinned, but you can just take the bishop and then run to f2, so that doesn't work. Okay, what else do we have? Well, like I said, we do have f5, which is interesting. We can put the knight on g6. After knight to d3, we probably should bring the bishop back to d6 to stop knight c5, which could be annoying. Let's say, what, c4? Is that playable? Maybe. How do we continue? How do we continue? Oh, we can just take that. What am I on about? Yeah, we can just take that. That's fine. We could also just play rook c8, just adding another layer of defense over there. Yeah, I think knight e1 is a good move. So it's a good find from my opponent. I don't know if it solves all of his problems, but it's a good move. Do I want to go to f5 instead? Would I rather go to f5? Knight d3. I'm thinking of like some really funny lines, like let's say bishop d3 challenging the knight, like knight to e3, where the rook is trapped, and if you take, then bishop takes, king h1, and something like queen g3, knight f3. I think that holds just. I think that just holds. Interesting line, though. Here. Okay, well, I'm expecting this. I can always bring the knight to h4, where it could be useful. Or I could even play a move like knight to g8, come to f6. That wouldn't be ridiculous. To try and force the move g4 through. So let's say knight g8, knight d3, bishop d6. Let's say rook to c1, trying to play c4. Rook c8, stopping that. Let's say b3, insisting on c4. Let's say knight to f6, c4. g4. The idea being if bishop takes, knight takes. Pawn takes. Bishop h2, king here, and then bishop to f4 would win the rook. That looks pretty fun. So knight g8 is an interesting idea. Very interesting idea. Okay, I like that. What about if I preemptively play bishop to d6, knight d3? Does anything change? I don't think so. I mean, I could try and go knight g6, knight f4, but all that's going to do is trade. Or I could take with the pawn, actually. I could take with the pawn. I don't think that's useful, though. I think that's just getting in the way of the diagonal, to be honest. So maybe not. I'm going knight g8. I like that. I like the move. I think it looks cool for a start. And I think it also makes a lot of sense. Makes a whole lot of sense. Because I think we need a knight on f6 to monitor these two squares. And I think white's queenside counterplay will just take too long to come to fruition. If we want to, we can always request a queen trade. And if you give a check on this diagonal, I'll just bring the bishop back. And we'll do that now anyway. So the king is completely safe. We don't have to worry about our king. The question is white's king completely safe? I don't know. I don't know. But neither does my opponent. Yeah, I think c4 is clearly the way to generate counterplay for white. And like I said, we could try and get a queen trade if we need to bail out, which is why I'm not particularly concerned. But to be honest, I mean, like, c4 takes a lot of prep. Again, if rook here, you still can't play c4 because I'll just take it. If b3, I can probably just push and keep the c-file shut. And again, if I need to, I can just play queen c6 and offer a queen trade. Probably. Although maybe you can use this diagonal and stop me from going queen c6 and target b7, which would be interesting. But then again, then g4 will come with tempo on the bishop, which could be a problem. And again, the rook on c1 is going to be vulnerable to bishop h2, king h1, and bishop 2, f4 check ideas if we can open up the h-file. I don't think f5, h4 is that good. I don't think it's that good. Super interesting position. I mean, we could even consider putting the knight on e4. It's just a good square. But I think the important thing here is trying to execute the move g4. So I think knight f6, g4 should be the plan. Yeah, very, very interesting. How does white fight here? Again, I think he has to try to get c4 in. Because if he doesn't get c4, let's say he plays b4, right? A bit of a silly looking move. Then what, like knight f6? b5? I can just ignore that and play g4. I don't even have to respond, I don't think. And do I have an immediate checkmate? Probably not. But, I mean, I'm in the driver's seat, for sure. Absolutely I am. I don't know, like, bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, check here. Again, I don't have a checkmate immediately. But I'm not that far off. I'm not that far off. I could even do something like, some funny line, where if I can open up the g-file, then I could, like, give a check and king h1 and bishop to bishop e5 discovered check and king g1 and bishop takes d4. And if you take my bishop, I'll mate you on h2 with my queen. So... Oh, yeah, then if g3, then I can take, because the pawn is pinned, and we can recycle the previous idea of bishop e3. That's quite cool. I don't know if I can stop that. That's a very interesting thing. And worst case scenario, I just go up a pawn, which I'll be, happy with. Yeah, these opposite colored bishops, they're not always a draw, people, I think, over-exaggerate the importance of opposite colored bishops in terms of determining the outcome of the game. I mean, we have so many pieces left on the board. There is a lot of chess left to be played. And we're also up on the clock now, which is funny because I burned a lot of time on the previous, 5 moves. Okay, rook c1 is played, as expected. c4 is coming. I should probably stop it. But what happens if I go knight f6, c4? If I take, then rook takes. d4. Well, then you just take. So no, let's stop it. Let's go rook c8. And I mean, the rook is just good on c8 anyway, right? It should be. It should be. If b3 trying to insist on c4, can I do anything about that? b3, knight f6, c4. g4, take. I would sack. I would sack, but the knight defends. That's so annoying. Otherwise, I'd probably try and go for the two rooks versus the queen because of how good my bishop is. Like bishop f1 and gh3, and that would be pretty crushing, but yeah, don't think so. Okay, what was my plan for b3? What was my plan? I thought I had something. Queen b8? Well, then I am allowing queen to d7. If c4 isn't played, then queen d7 can be played, which is an annoying-looking move. Although I suppose, actually, no, knight f6 and the queen just gets booted. There's nothing to take. So we don't have to be concerned about that. So b3, queen b8, c4, knight f6. Take. Rook c8, queen c8, rook c1. Nah, I don't think I like it. My king looks way too exposed. Looks way too exposed. Rook e1, no. That can't be the way to go. That's too slow, surely. I mean, you give your king some breathing room, which makes sense, but now I'm going to go knight to f6. And now with b3, g4, c4, then I take first? Maybe? Although I suppose you still take with tempo on the queen. Huh? This I didn't consider. That's an interesting move, though. So if take, what? Bishop a6 with a discovered attack on my queen? Interesting. Okay, what about g4? Like, knight takes, I guess, and you're fine. Makes sense. I could go knight to e5, followed by a move like f6 to kick the knight away, or even f5 to try and go g4 anyway. If knight here, then I am threatening to take. Yeah. Yeah, I am. Interesting move, though. I suppose c4 has a lot of support now as well. c4 is very well supported. It's not a plan that I considered, but it's definitely a viable plan. Opponent is fighting well. Okay. Knight e4, c4. Take. Well, then we sack. Then we just sack. And we should be winning. We might get that. That would be pretty fun. Because the knight no longer defends the rook. I think we'd have like 2 rooks and a bishop for the queen there. Or 2 rooks and a knight for the queen, which, you know, should be winning. Knight e4 feels correct. We don't actually have f6. I tell a lie. Because knight g6 check is an issue. So, okay, let's not do that. But we are probably just threatening to win a pawn. And if, like, queen to d7, we can always just drop our queen back to c7. And everything is defended, and we can win that pawn up endgame, I think. Yeah, we should be able to win that. Particularly because our structure's pretty nice. And you can say the g5 pawn is a weakness, but yeah, no. Can't we just take? Take. Maybe that's the line. If we just take, I'll just take the rook, and that should be winning. I mean, I don't see any other option. Take. Yeah, he goes for it. Oh, yeah, our rooks just aren't connected, which is the issue. What about g6? Preparing king g7. If take, taking h2, well, then we take on f2 probably. So bishop f1. Knight d2 is met with queen to b4 check, picking up the knight. So, what, king g7? Preparing knight d2? Interesting. If knight c5... I'm not sure if that works. What about d4? What about d4? Bishop f3? Probably. Knight c5. I mean, we've got a very nice passed pawn. Very nice passed pawn. I reckon we go for that. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go d4. I don't really have enough time to calculate all the lines, but it feels very committal to be going into a 2-rook versus queen sort of endgame, where I'm not sure. Give me like 2 moves and I'll be better, for sure. Also, you know, e5 is weak, but I suppose bishop f3 and this will be defended, so that's all right. Bishop f3. I think knight c5 should be played to blockade the pawn, put pressure on, defend b7, and then just attack the queen. Also support d3, also knight to d3 is an idea, so let's say queen to a3, pinning the knight. g6. Okay, that's a strange move. Okay, knight c5. Queen c2. Ah, I suppose if g6, now you have the option to sack. That's interesting. But if queen c2, can't I just take on a5? Yeah, so you're going to go for that, which pins the knight, which makes sense. And you're also defending this, and this is defended. But what? I'm just going to go g6, king g7, and then surely I'll be better. This looks pretty good to me. This looks pretty good. I mean, I have a passed pawn. I think my knight's better than his bishop. To be honest, e5 is quite weak. I suppose g5 is weak, which is the counter-argument. g4 isn't going away completely, though. That could be an idea in the future. But for the time being, this diagonal is shut. Maybe the f6 square could be a problem if the queen can get there. Okay, bishop f1. Alright, king g7. I mean, d3, d2 ideas are pretty interesting. Do I have a threat right now? I don't think so. I think we just have nice pressure. g4 still can be played, like I mentioned. Even rook h4 is a move that can be considered. But I suppose g3 kicks the rook away. Okay, that's just a blunder, no? Knight b3. Queen g5. Knight c1. Queen f6. King g8. Rook is defended. Rook takes. I don't really see where the counterplay is. Queen d8. Looks pretty damn good. I should look for anything better, but I don't think there is. I don't think there needs to be, either. And I mean, at the end of the day, this is a double attack. So we're going to be losing a pawn, unless we play a move like Queen d8, I suppose. But that's kind of passive. And obviously, this is on the cards. So, knight b3. Very, very nice. One of the reasons I thought my knight was better than his bishop is just because the way that his pieces were coordinated, all on the same color square around each other, is just conducive to knight forks. And obviously it's paid off. After queen f6, I don't want to put my king on h7, although it looks natural to give this rook the ability to traverse the back rank. It leaves f7 weak, and the queen has to defend f7, and also just queen h4, and he could repeat. So we would have to go to g8 at some point. Also, I have an open h-file, so my rook can always go to h5, to like f5, that kind of thing. So it's really not a big deal. And the king is very safe on the g8 square. Very safe. So rook takes. Rook h5 looks good, going after the e-pawn. I don't see a reason not to play it. If f4, rook f5, queen h4. I've got to be careful my rook doesn't get trapped there. Okay, a little bit of a desperate move, and I don't think it works because of queen takes. Obviously, my opponent's trying to play bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, which would be a problem because he'd be picking up my rook. Except after queen takes e5, if you go for this, I'll just take your queen. So that just doesn't work. And yeah, the queen can't give a check in any manner. And now we are just up a clean exchange. We win back the pawn that white took on g5. We have a passed d4 pawn. c4 is blockaded very nicely. a5 is weak. b2 is probably weak. And we're up, obviously, the exchange. So, I mean, what? Queen f3, going after b7. We're also massively up on time, which is useful. Rook b6, bishop e4. Game isn't necessarily over. So probably just what? Rook c7? Queen e7 is playable. Rook c7. Check. King g7. That looks alright. Everything's defended. Ooh, wait, there's a very sneaky move that we can play. Queen g5. Offering a queen trade and threatening the rook. And white has no checks. So we would have to trade queens with me. The reason I find that move, by the way, is one, you have to realize the white queen has no checks on our king. And two, you have to realize this rook is undefended. So you should look for ways to attack the rook. So I was looking at something like this, and then I realized, oh, this attacks the rook, but also offers a queen trade, which forces a queen trade, because the queen can't move anywhere to defend the rook, because there's things in the way. Okay, I mean, we don't have to do anything complicated here. I think just rook c7. Let's not overcomplicate this. Because we don't want to get to an endgame where it's like rook versus bishop, for example. I assume that's a draw. I actually don't know. But, like, we don't want to just trade all the pawns, is my point. Let's go rook e5. Attack the bishop. If f3, then f5. I don't want to play f5 immediately, because then my rook is out of the game. So we first want to play rook e5 with tempo, and then play f5 to kick the bishop. And then we can obviously invade my opponent's position. So let's say something like f3, f5, bishop d3, rook e3 looks very nice. I don't know, bishop f1, d3, king f... Oh no, king f2 might be an issue there. You get my point. Okay, bishop f3. Can we push? I think so. If you block... take. Looks pretty good. Is there anything better? I don't think there has to be. I don't think there has to be anything better. Here, c5. Well, no, then we get d2. Here, check, king h2. Take. And then just rook d7, and yeah, that's completely winning. Completely winning. If king f1... d2, rook d1. We pick up c4, that's just game over, because b4 will fall. Okay, so my opponent loses on time, but yeah, we have a completely winning position. Very interesting game. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's jump into the analysis and see whether there was any other ways to go about the position. I'm not sure whether we could have executed an attack fully or not, but I was pretty happy with how we handled that. I will also show you a few lines that I was considering, such as the queen for 2 rooks line. We'll jump into some of that. But yeah, let's see what the computer has to say. Okay, so computer gives 78.2% accuracy to my opponent. For us, 83.1. Looks like there were a few times that we made a mistake and white failed to capitalize on it. But let's jump into it, see what it has to say. So, e4. c6. Caro Kann. ed5, cd5, d4. As I said, bishop g4 is a move, but I don't know, like, just yet it's not quite as good. There's h3, and, like, we just have to take, basically. If we retreat, I think we're in a lot of trouble. Yeah, there's bishop b5, knight c6, g4, bishop g6, knight e5, and we're just... It's so hard to defend this position. So we would have to take after h3, and do we really want to trade that quickly? I don't know. So we go knight c6, bishop e2, bishop f5, and we basically have an equal position straight away. c3, and it's just zeros. Zeros. That's not bad for 6 moves in with the black pieces. e6 is best, preparing bishop to d6. Castles, bishop f4 is definitely the best move, so that on bishop d6, black can trade. No, white can trade. And this is just dead equal. But we have a slight edge in this position. So queen c7. As we found out, this diagonal was very useful. h3. Okay, here... Yeah, knight f6 is very good. Knight h4. The engine wants not bishop g6. It doesn't like that. It likes bishop e4. Okay, well, I saw this, and I thought, okay, well, knight takes, knight takes. What's the point? Okay, I suppose this knight should probably come back to f3. Castles. Say bishop e3, normal move. It wants to go f5 and lock the knight in place. So if bishop d3, I mean, if take, then just take, right? Interesting. Interesting. I just assumed opening the h-file would be good. And what if y... Okay, if f3, then I guess we just drop back. And, I mean, this pawn is horrific, right? It just weakens the dark squares so much. So, okay. Knight takes, h takes, knight f3, knight h5. Engine wants me to castle. And I suppose we can just go for normal plans here. Let's say let rook e1. I don't know, a6, bishop to d3, b5, something along these lines. I don't know. Looks reasonable. Knight h5 though. Knight g5. The engine actually wants me to just put the knight back there, which is quite funny. But I would knight f4, which is also completely fine. Taking is not good. The best move is bishop b5. Okay. a6, bishop a4. What's the point? Is it to put the bishop on c2? Oh, no, sorry. Rook h5, asking the knight what it's doing there. And then you take... What? And this is okay for white, I guess. Also, the engine wants king e7, which I'm never playing in a million years. I don't know, I think this looks quite good for black, to be honest. I'm not really sure why white has play here. What happens after g5? Rook e1. King f8. Bishop takes, g takes. I like this for black. What's wrong with taking with the bishop, by the way? Oh, there's nothing wrong with it. Although we can't sack here. Whatever. Interesting position. My opponent took knight f3. A6. G5 was also... Yeah, I probably should have gone G5 straight away. But I couldn't figure out what my actual threat was. I think that was my issue. So let's say, I don't know, rook e1. Okay, it wants a6 anyway. So nothing changes, really. a6, a4, knight e7. That's what it didn't like. I thought rerouting the knight was a good idea. It just wants g5. So let's say knight e1, like my opponent did in the game. Check. Okay, it wants to do it like this. Knight f3, bishop f4. Oh, well, no, now g4 is on the way, and you can't do anything about it. So the engine suggests this, which looks very dubious for white. Knight g1, yeah, this looks pretty crushing. Interesting. And I suppose, I mean, e6 is irrelevant. I can always go king f7 anyway. Or even rook h6. Okay. I would knight e7. a5. g5. We are slightly better still. Queen a4, king f8. Engine wants knight c6, but I'm not going to admit I was wrong, am I? So knight e1. Again, we have an advantage. Knight g8 is not the best. Engine wants to give the check, and then... I don't understand that. What's the point? Knight d3. Okay, same as we got in the game, basically. Now f5. Okay, this is how it wants to do it. But it also wants the king on the h-file so that g4 can't be met with takes. Knight g8, though. Knight d3. Yeah, again, it wants me to deliver the check first. It really wants me to give the check. Because now g4, the pawn is pinned, which I just didn't realise was important. Rook a c1. Here, my only move to I have one move to maintain an advantage. I have one move. You can try and find it if you want. I don't know if you're going to find it. I don't know if I would have found it, given much more time, because knight f6 just looks so natural. The move is rook h4. You're saying, what? What does that do? c4. Oh, yeah, but there's this. That's the idea. So you're just stopping c4 by playing rook h4, which is just nuts. And obviously, if g3, we just sack and we win. Rook c is what I played. c4 should still be played. I saw dc. And on b3, I was considering pushing. But the point is there's knight c5. This is the important move. And if this, you take here first. Which we both missed. My opponent went rook fe1 after a long think. Again, the engine wants rook h4 so that c4 can be met with takes. I again didn't see it. I played knight f6, which is the second best move. Knight e5, knight e4 is okay. Better is... Basically, we can't take. I don't think. Because after take, bishop a6, we are losing. So we would have to play knight to e4 now, which is basically what we got in the game. So knight e4, c4 is inaccurate because of takes. My master plan was if c takes, I was going to do this. However, I failed to realize we have mate in 2. And if king f1, then knight d2. Even so, this is still winning. This is just winning. Just bishop d6, and we have a knight and 2 rooks for the queen, which is just too much. So bishop e5, de5 only move. Here I have one move to maintain the advantage. And now I see it. Try and find it. You might have seen it during the game, actually. So it's actually queen c5, threatening this. And if take, of course, then we take, and we just have mating coming after rook h3, take, and knight here, mate. However, what happens if white just defends? Well, then we have to find knight g3. That's what works. See, I'd considered trying to threaten checkmate, but I thought, well, white just defends, and then, you know, why is our queen on c5? We haven't solved anything. And that's a good line of thinking, because here the best thing we can do is just play d4, right? And then I was like, well, we're blocking this off, so what's the point? And there's also queen d7 now, which I was concerned about. But the point is knight g3, which I just didn't even see, threatening both pieces. And white's only move is rook fe1. And here we can repeat, or we can take and find rook h4 pinning. Okay, nuts. d4 is what I played. And here, white should play c5. Excuse me? Obviously, if takes, then this. We can all see that. But what's the point? Is it c6 to go after a6? What happens after rook h4, let's say? Yeah, it is c6. That's the idea. Wow. I thought that my opponent was going to play bishop to f3. When I was going to go knight to c5, I was expecting queen a3. And here I was considering moves like king g8. And here we're okay. White is better, but we're okay. But bishop d3 really surprised me because I just thought it was a bad move. Knight c5, queen b4. Again, I was expecting queen a3, but each to their own, I suppose. So queen b4. g6 is inaccurate. No, it isn't. That's the best move. Okay, well, that's confusing. g6 is the best move, but it says it's an inaccuracy, but it's not. Bishop f1, best move from my opponent. Here, g4 is the best move. Okay, what happens if take? Oh, yes, of course, f5. Why did I not see this? That's a very cool move, though. Obviously, en passant leads to mate, so you can't do that. If you take with the g-pawn, then queen h7, and white's in a lot of trouble. So the best move is g3. And then if take, we kind of ruin our structure. Now if this, then this, and if check, then here. And we still don't have this because the knight is pinned. f4, interesting position. King g7 is what I played, which I thought was good. Queen d2 is obviously a massive blunder. The best move is rook c to d1. I was going to play just something like rook to d8. And I thought we had good play here. Engine disagrees. It says queen a3. The obvious move, of course. And after d3, b4. Okay, yeah, we're just losing a... Yeah, we're losing a pawn. Okay, well, can't we just not lose a pawn? I suppose the knight has nowhere to go. The knight just has no moves other than d7. If we go there immediately... If you take, then I can take, and I'm alright. So white has to find queen e7. That's annoying. That's annoying. And if we return, then queen f6, king g8. If you take, queen a5, we still have some play. But my opponent went queen d2, which was very kind of him. Knight b3, queen g5, knight c1, queen f6, and here, yeah, king h7 is actually a draw. This is actually a draw, apparently. I think because white's going to pick up the d4 pawn. So king g8 is the best move. Rook c1, rook to h5. The engine likes queen a5. Why did I not play this again? I actually don't know. I just liked rook h5, which is a very good move anyway. Bishop d3. f4 is what I was expecting, which is the best move. Here, I considered rook f5, but after queen h4, I thought I had to return anyway. Because I was concerned about moves like bishop d3, but I suppose I always have this, so that's actually fine. The engine says g5, by the way, which is just nuts. Because if take... Okay, I'm never playing that, ever. Why? What's the point? That's a ridiculous move. I'm never playing that. Okay, bishop d3, though. We take on e5, which is the... actually the only move that maintains a sizable advantage. Because if we're lazy and play a move like rook h6, then b4, and the game is equal. We have to be careful, because white is up a pawn. And the bishop's good, because it's attacking and blockading. So queen e5 only move, queen e7, and here we find queen g5. The engine says rook c7 is the best move, and after queen e8, king g7, we're just much better. But I would rather just have an easy endgame. So I forced the trade, bishop b4, rook c7. The engine wants me to go after this because the point is, what, rook b8? Yeah, I probably should have seen that, to be fair. But then again, like, this just looks scary. There's no need to go into this. The engine says it doesn't matter because it just wants to do this. And we always get back in time. But let's just not overcomplicate things. Rook e5, engine wants rook b5, which is disgusting. I went rook e5. The idea being that on f3 I play f5, right? That's my whole point. But bishop f3, d3, and here I was calculating rook d1, rook c4, rook d3, rook b4. And, I mean, if you defend your a pawn, then, I mean, I don't really understand how you're going to defend this position. And if you play... what was it? If you play king f1, then d2, rook d1, and I was just going to take here, and after something like take, then like check, bishop d1, this is just clearly much better because b4 and a5 are on dart squares where the bishop can't defend them, so they're going to fall. I don't know, something like rook b1 looks very nice. But my opponent runs out of time in a completely lost position. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the game. I hope you learned a lot. If you want to see another very interesting Caro Kann game, check out the video up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in one of those videos.